printmaking. Perfect. So Joe, can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see that presentation? Okay, perfect, thank you. Okay, hello and welcome to today's short talk on mathematical art or artistic mathematics, which is a weird title and really a stupid question. But it was the title of an exhibition that I curated recently, and so I wanted to take that thinking a bit further today. So I've posed it as a question. You'll see shortly that I disagree with it as a premise. So very briefly, I really want to emphasise that if you want to tweet or otherwise use social media in this session, please do. It's really great to have that conversation taken wider. So my Twitter handle is there and the hashtag for the day is there. So if you want to take photos of the presentation, try not to get photos of me mid-talking because it's never good, then please do tweet anything that you like, dislike, disagree with, have a critique about. All of that just makes us better. I'm very open to having those conversations, so please feel free to do that. So I'll just introduce myself to you. My name is Lucy Rycroft-Smith. As I said, Twitter handle is @honeypie2 for a variety of reasons we won't go into today. I'm currently at the University of Cambridge. I try very hard not to define myself by a very particular identity. And you'll see on my Twitter bio, I try and just use verbs because it's a bit of a get out here. I do all those things regularly, most of them in a professional capacity, and alongside that lots of other things that are in a more amateur capacity. But I think the question of identity is going to run through today quite a lot. Technically, I'm a mathematical designer and education researcher, I suppose, on some level at the University of Cambridge. So the question I'm posing for you, which is related to the title here, and to often the question that we ask children quite a lot, and I'm a parent, which subject do you like best? And here the two subjects that I'm considering is maths and art, and the kind of follow-up question, are you more of an artist or a mathematician? And so maybe just take a sec to think about that and how you feel about that. And I think this question is a question I've been asked a great deal in my life, not least because I studied maths and art all the way through school and to university level. And people have asked me constantly, which one do you like best? And which one do you want to pursue professionally? And so it's the question that I have dealt with in various ways in the past, but now I'm ready to respond to it. I'm now 37, it's taken me this long, by saying that's a false dichotomy. And by that I mean, I don't like the way that question set up. And I've done there a little homage to Lucille Bluth from Arrested Development, who once answered a question in a restaurant. I think the question was plate or platter. And she said, I don't understand the question, I won't respond to it, with the most exceptional haughtiness you can muster, right? So I feel like that's actually the response I'd probably make to this question now, depending on the intention of the person who asked it, with different degrees of haughtiness. I'm unhappy with the framing of it, and I think we need to be very careful when we ask young people and adults how their identity aligns with school subjects, about what that sets up for later on. Okay, so that's, as I've just said, how I see this mathematically, right? So as a mathematician, I would say these two things are not disjoint sets. If you want the more, I guess, more straightforward answer, it's this slide, right? This is how I conceptualize this now. This is better for me, but it's actually not finished. There's more thinking that I've done here. This is what I want to emphasize today. And design is really important here. I think there's elements of what happens during mathematics and mathematical thinking and artistic thinking and art that overlap, but actually I think design is really important to consider here. And by design, I mean creating things which have a particular intention, a communication, a purpose, quite tightly focused, as opposed to art and sometimes maths, and something about changing behaviour sometimes with design as well. So this is where I'm really interested in what's going on. And I've been working professionally and personally in this space for about four or 5 years now, and it is extraordinary. And I'm inviting you to come and live there with me, and all the rainbows if you're into that kind of thing. And I'm going to show you just a few examples of the type of work that I do that fits there. But I'm conscious the word work here doesn't even cover it, because some of it is pleasure, some of it's joy. Some of this stuff I get paid to do, some I really don't, and most of it I don't know when I first start whether it's going to lead to something that is in some sense a product or it's just for fun. Okay, so this is essentially what I'm saying. I think it's really easy when we go through the school system with its school subjects in very defined ways that we struggle with overlap. And when we do have overlap, we call it something specific. This is cross-curricular work, or this is primary school work, or topic work. And what we forget is actually that those subject divides are quite artificial. And I'm studying at the moment for a PhD. We have all kinds of fancy words for what we do when we cross over subjects, but it is really no different to what young children do when they're practicing mark making, when they're thinking about creating data. They don't call it art, they don't call it math, they don't call it design. It doesn't matter what you call it, because actually all of those skills transfer. And so I really want to make the case that I don't think there's a good reason for saying these things, practicing these things should be separated, and why they couldn't overlap in really interesting ways. One of the problems is allowing ourselves to do that in the classroom and outside. And one of the issues is ourselves and our self-talk. But another issue here is other people. And I have met plenty of people in my life who I would characterise as a pigeonholer or a gatekeeper. And those people will tell you you're not allowed to be more than one thing. Pick one, please. They'll tell you you're not good enough. They'll tell you you can't be a mathematician and creative. They'll tell you you can't be female and a mathematician, all kinds of things. And, you know, it's about ignoring those voices and not internalising them. And the little star there is because I recognise that sometimes there's systemic injustice and oppression that means sometimes you can't ignore those people. So it's a privilege that I have, that I'm able to practice these things and transgress these boundaries with very little criticism now, as you know, in the middle of my life. But there were times when it was harder for me, but I acknowledge it was probably easier for me than most people. And so I think, you know, this ignoring pigeonholers and gatekeepers message only goes so far, I'll give you that, and sometimes it's not possible. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about some of the cool things that I think are happening at the intersection of maths, art and design for me when I practice these things, and potentially can also be taken back to the classroom as in some way a lesson, although I wouldn't necessarily characterise it that way. And some of this has come from a reflection on lockdown learning for me, because I've been teaching my daughters at home. And some of this has come from my own work and my own sort of artistic expression, and also my professional work. So 3 things there I think are really interesting happening at this intersection. And I'm going to look at those 3 in turn. So we've got attention to sameness and difference, intuitive and intentional decision making, and then progress and process. And so I'll show you a couple of examples from my work, and you can see what you think. So this is a sketch I knocked up yesterday to illustrate something. And if you're familiar with this particular shape, it's fractal. It's called a Sierpinski triangle. And it is something that I had to draw to explain something. And I do a lot of mathematical drawing for all kinds of things. And so while I was drawing this, I was reflecting on the types of thinking that I had to do this drawing. So there was a sense of sameness and difference that comes out beautifully here. A fractal is a kind of mathematical object that is defined by doing the same process over and over again, so iterating, repeating, but at a different scale. And so you should be able to see there that I've gone through various iterations, getting smaller and smaller. And in fact, I probably could carry on and get even more small and detailed there. And in order to do that, I've been doing some paying attention to sameness and some paying attention to difference. And right now, what's interesting is the maths part of this, I had to do some work on. The art part of it at the moment is underdeveloped because this is just a sketch. I haven't thought yet about intentionally how to draw attention to that dimension. I haven't thought about how to colour it, I haven't really thought about the design. This is just a sketch. This is work in progress. Here's another piece that I think really illustrates that intersection of maths and art and design. And this is a printmaking piece that I did recently that's actually been picked up by one of the teacher-facing maths journals in America. They want to print this on the back of their journal. And it is a piece that is made from lino print that you repeat. And so there's obviously sameness there when you do lino printing. I don't know if you've ever done it. It's really, really, really fun. But you'll see there that I've made some really intentional choices about what's going on in the background of that print. So it would be quite easy to do a single colour at the back and then print and overlay. I haven't done that. I've done some variation going on in the background with the colour, and I've actually let that show through. There's like a cheeky little strip at the side. And all of that's intentional. And the fact that the print never comes out exactly the same is partly intentional, also partly just a feature of printmaking. But there's something about the interplay of sameness and difference in this piece, and it's behind me, you can probably see, which I find really interesting. And it's artistically interesting, design-wise it's interesting. Mathematically it's really interesting because the short part that I've shown you on the right there is the print. And if you are interested, it's a print of polynomials of odd degree. And it's basically a graph that I've taken and just repeated. And on its own, it looks quite like a graph, but when you repeat the units, suddenly what we have is this sense of dynamism, of flow, of movement. It looks a bit like DNA. It's not a mathematical object anymore in any real sense. It's a very different thing. And there's something about transforming there that's really exciting to me. So that's sameness and difference. Now I'm going to talk about intuitive and intentional decision making. One of the really exciting things I find about teaching maths is the main goal, like the overall goal, is to help students make sense of structure. And one way in which they do that is to develop an intuition. So when they see a new problem, they don't just say, oh, I'll never be able to solve that, that's too hard. They actually have a sense of, how is this problem like something I might have seen before? How can I take what I already know and move forward with that thinking? And in order to do that, they have to sort of get really messy, get experimental with maths in exactly the same way as they would with art and design. And so I've shown this piece as an example because this is quite a mathematical piece. This is called Cartesian, and it's about making straight lines out of paint dripping, but also the way that things intersect and make points and shapes. And one of the decisions I made here, which was completely intuitive because I'd made lots of intentional decisions in the past, and I'd kind of internalized it, was the way the colour scales worked together and the sense of there being particular order to the colours. That was quite an intuitive decision. I look back on that and thought, oh, okay, I see why I did that now. So it's something about what's at the surface and the kind of decisions that you have to make over and over again before they somehow come deeper and become more unconscious. And that happens in all three disciplines and really, really in the middle a lot. Something else I wanted to talk about with intuitive and intentional decision making is the story of this, this piece. So I don't know if you can see what's going on here. There's some chocolate bars that have been fashioned somehow into graphs. And this was a piece that I made for something a couple of years ago. And we had some data and we needed to visualize the data. This is a really fun part of my job I get to do. And my colleague said, this is what we need to do. We need to caption these graphs. We need to write some text. And I said, do you know what? I think I can do most of that in one image. I think I can say what the graph is without any caption in an image. And my colleague said, well, I don't see it. I don't see what you're describing. And I sort of said, oh, it looks like this and it doesn't. So oh, I'm not sure. I said, right, hold on. And I went away and I drew this image. This is a sketch. And my colleague just said, oh yeah, I get it. And it was a really intuitive moment where I had done so much data visualization before, you know, it wasn't the first time, but I had grasped at this point that I knew I had a sense of being able to design something that could convey a lot of information in one image. So in case you care, this is about what, if you ask people, when we had quite a large poll, what their favourite chocolate is in the tin. And so these are the rankings. Okay, so I just wanted to talk about this piece, which is quite a recent piece. And I did this a couple of weeks ago. It's a digital piece, and one of my favourite pieces that I've done for a while. And this comes from something that I'm going to talk about in a minute called the 100-Day Project. But the decision making here about use of colour was really intuitive, and I find this a lot when I'm choosing colours. Because I do a lot of design work, I know colour does a huge job. It carries a really heavy load in explaining things, often mathematical things, but also elsewhere. And I found that that carried over. So when I needed to do this portrait, I started looking at colours. These aren't, you know, the colours that were in my reference image. And I got this sort of sense of excitement that I wanted to get across, and picked the colours, went ahead and did it, and was really happy with the way it came out. And that was, again, some kind of intentions that had been internalized until they became intuitive. So the last thing I want to talk about in terms of what's going on at the intersection is progress and process. And this is something that I've been making for a while. It's actually a graph. It's a knitted graph. I'm certainly not the first person to do this. But I found that I saw somebody doing this last year and thought, this is such a great idea, especially because this year is kind of weird. And there's something about getting through at the moment that we have. You know, we're all just getting through on some level until what we don't know exactly, until life becomes more normal. And so what I wanted to do is knit a line for each day, and each line has 24 stitches to symbolise 24 hours. And so what I decided to do was, this is a weather chart, a weather graph, and it's actually climate. It's to do with temperature. And so I decided that I made a kind of little key. I got some different colours lined up, and I decided that I would look at the temperature at midday each day and then just knit a line. And so I've knitted every single day this year. And that's at the moment what it looks like. And there's some lovely mathematical stuff happening there. And I would definitely use this with a class to talk about, you know, what a graph is, how we make decisions about that. What can you tell me without my key, without, you know, knowing exactly what refers to what, but what kinds of distributions and patterns you can see already in this data without any knowledge of, you know, exactly what it represents. But there's something here about the progress and the process. This isn't a commercial piece. I'll never give this, or I'll never give it away. I'll definitely never sell it. It's not well structured. I'm not a good knitter, but that doesn't matter. This is about process, this piece, and it's about incremental progress. And I have already this kind of tangible record of this year where every single hour is represented in some way. And I find knitting my way through the days really therapeutic. So here's some more about progress and process, and these pieces are actually up behind me as well. These are 4 canvases that are used to represent the 4 mathematical transformations, which are rotation, which is top right there, reflection, which is top left, enlargement, which is bottom left, and then sort of upside down, but I quite like it that way. The bottom right one there is translation. And I am really interested in colour, as you can see, but also the way that materials move and the texture of paint. And in this one, I kind of lucked out. I got a mixture of paint that was really odd. I don't think I could ever do it again. The sediment came out in really weird ways. Well, in the bottom left one, actually bits of paint ended up just separating out. I didn't do it on purpose. But there's something about that process. And this was the perfect marriage for me of mathematical and artistic process. So I'm trying to show you mathematical process, and I'm using artistic process to do that. And so, for example, the top left, I actually sawed the canvas in half, threw some paint on it, and then popped it together, you know, like a butterfly painting that you might do with small children, and then opened it out again, and to some extent healed the canvas, but not completely. So you can see that actually I've broken the 2-dimensionality of the canvas. I've broken out of that to show the way that reflection works in maths. And there's some really interesting, you know, mathematical structure stuff in there. But actually, this was just really fun to do. It was to think about how do I portray those processes in an artistic form. It's a really interesting mathematical and design challenge. So I talked about portraits, and I said I'd mention the 100-day project, and the progress and process thing for me this year has been huge. So I, as a mathematician, pretty much naturally, and certainly in the course of my work, do a bit of maths every day, and I do maths a lot. And so I flex those mathematical muscles a great deal. And as an artist, I'm much more on and off, mostly because it's not my professional job, although there is a part of my job that involves art. And so I made this commitment, which was not my idea. One of my friends suggested it in January. So it's the 31st of January to do 100 days of anything. artistic. And if you search this hashtag on Twitter, there's some beautiful stuff, and Instagram too, just gorgeous. But the commitment here is not to make something amazing. It's not to finish anything in any sense, I don't think. It's just do it every day for 100 days. And I knew that I was not good at portraits. I really have not had those skills. I've not really studied particularly. And so I thought that's something I'd really like to get good at. And so I'm on day 84 today. I've done one every day. Some days I've been really unhappy with them and really struggled to post them online and, you know, take the kind of responsibility for them, but I did it anyway. And some days I've spent ages on them and had that time in the day, you know, during my coffee break or whatever. And some days I've had 10 minutes and done a quick scribble, but I've done one every day. And I'm learning also about how that also helps in all senses of my job. The mathematical and design spheres of my job are also being helped by doing this artistic project for 100 days, which is really interesting. And there's all kinds of lessons there, but one in particular being this incremental progress, that it's really better to do a little of something every day if you can, rather than wait a few months and then try and do it all in one go. That's not true of everything, but it's certainly true of artistic process and design process, and to some extent mathematical process too. So if you follow me on Twitter, and apologies if you didn't already, you'll get a lot of this because I'm posting one every day and people are trying to guess who they are. I thought it would be more fun that way, which is also hilarious because when you do a really poorly constructed one, no one can tell who it is. So you also get the joy of having lots of people guessing wrongly. But this is, like I say, a hashtag on Twitter. Please feel free to have a look and see, and give me some feedback and guess who you think they are. So what I'm saying here is that not only do these things intersect, but actually there's an advantage in them intersecting. I've definitely made the case here that just practicing maths on its own, just practicing art on its own, just practicing design on its own, actually to some extent it's poorer. It's not as rich for me. And I thought about some of the ways that borrowing from other disciplines, and you know, I use that word quite loosely here, actually supports better practice, more interesting thinking, richer things. And some of the ways that I thought about it are here. So we've got design adding humour to maths. I've seen a lot of people do mathematical cartoons, not just funny maths jokes, but actually trying to illustrate something important and mathematical. Art adding accessibility to maths is really important, and this is one of the ways that I taught art to my daughter during lockdown. Is we constructed geometrical patterns and pictures, and that for me was a way of addressing her worries and anxieties and fears of maths, and not seeing herself as a mathematician. So when I say accessibility, I mean making the subject more attractive, but revealing it in different ways too. Maths adding structure to art. I mean, I'm a mathematical artist primarily. I do lots of things, but the actual process of thinking about a mathematical idea that I can express through art, but also things like portraits. There is no way you can do a portrait without some understanding of proportion. It might be a very rough and ready intuitive understanding, or it might be quite a mathematical understanding. And you know, it doesn't matter, but that structure is inherently mathematical. We've also got ideas of proportional design too. You know, if you do any design work that's graphic based or text based, it's helpful to have some ideas of mathematical proportion. And again, they might be quite intuitive. You might not realise that you're practicing maths, but you know, you are. And then we've got things like art adding emotional resonance to design. I mean, the thing that distinguishes art from design for me is a wider channel of communication and a deeper emotional resonance. Not always, but to some extent. And so that's really important, really, really important. Adding that extra bit that you didn't need to design for functionality, but actually it gives it an aesthetic, or it gives it an emotional resonance, or I just look at it and go, well, that's funny. And I don't know why sometimes. And then the functionality to art, which design brings. So I think it's really important, I mentioned this earlier, but that, you know, when we're thinking about this process and progress thing, that, you know, in art, it's always been clear to me, and I think I've had a very good art education, that I don't need to finish everything, and the process is really important, much more important than the product. And I've learned to take that into my design and maths spheres too. And ultimately, anything that I work on has to be considered an experiment. Otherwise, it's not creative. I get too constrained. And so that idea that when you start something, there's absolutely no duty on you to finish it is really important. And I think that's something to take into all three domains and elsewhere. Oh, goodness me. It's taken me 37 years probably to get to this point, and I wonder if I'm truly there. But I think growing up as somebody who was really interested in mathematics and studied mathematics, and quite an academic person, quite, you know, a quiet scholarly person, it was fairly clear to me that the art was a side thing. It was a hobby, you know, you just do a little bit of drawing now and again, but actually, you know, you're an intelligent scholarly person, and you should study hard things and not think about art, because art isn't for those people, and that's so damaging and so unhelpful. And you know, making things is for everyone, but it's particularly for people who feel like they've been labelled that they're not creative, or that the things that they're interested in or like studying are, like in that Venn diagram, you know, disjoint and separate from artistic and creative things. It makes me really, really sad. And I've put for no reason, because this is something that people say to me all the time. Why are you making that? What's that for? And sometimes it's a commission, sometimes somebody's asked me to design something, but I mean, a huge amount of the time it's for no reason. And that's my shorthand for, I don't want to go into it. I shouldn't have to. I don't want to justify to you or anybody else why I'm making this thing. I'm making this thing because I want to make this thing. And having that courage for your convictions is sometimes really hard, especially when you feel like what you're making isn't commercial. It's not professional, you couldn't sell it, you're not, you know, you're just an amateur, you're not as good as everyone else, you're an imposter. All those feelings come crowding in. And if you've ever felt that way, I highly recommend The Artist's Way, which is a book and a kind of, I guess, self-help course. It sounds awful. It definitely sounded awful to me, and I resisted it for many years, but it broke that for me. It broke that idea that it's frivolous or stupid or selfish to make things, and now I'm beyond that, and I think it was really helpful. And then finally, you know, in education, but particularly in maths and science education, there is, I think, a sense that making things beautiful as well as useful is a waste of time, maybe a waste of money, certainly a waste of energy and resources, and I just don't think that's true. And so there is, I mean, there's a lot of evidence to support that things that are beautiful as well as useful are more functional, and to some extent get a different response. That's important. Also, being surrounded by beautiful things is just important. And so, you know, just because you're a maths teacher or a science teacher doesn't mean that you shouldn't be surrounded by gorgeous, lovely resources, images, sculptures, things that really make your heart sing, as well as things that are useful. And so I often in my head ponder the difference between a painting, an image, a diagram, a graph, a chart, because actually for me sometimes they really blur, and that's exciting and fine and not a problem. So what I've done is just collected a few sources of information and resources for anyone who might be interested. I'm conscious that lots of people perhaps want to take these away. And so other than just, you know, talking to me further about it, which you're very welcome to, a couple of things which I think would be particularly useful. So Alex Burke has done this colouring book, and in fact Alex Bellos did one before and wrote the forward for this. So there's at least two in the world. And this one's called Beautiful Symmetry, it's the most recent one. And when it says a colouring book about maths, it's not just colouring, there is maths in it. And what's beautiful about both of these projects is that you can just colour it in and just enjoy the shapes and the design and choosing colours and thinking about media, but you can also flip to the bits about maths and understand how the forms have been generated. And so I think, you know, that choice is really well presented in this book. So I'd really recommend this book. I'd also recommend this one, but with a caveat, it's enormous. And I say this because I was carrying it downstairs yesterday and dropped it, and my partner thought I'd fallen down the stairs. It's probably about 20 kilograms. So I recommend this book because it's gorgeous. You know, it's a coffee table book, but it's also very well written by Professor Lynn Gamwell, who I got to interview about it a couple of years ago, where the idea of aesthetics and abstraction is really examined in detail in terms of, it's called cultural history, and I'd say that's definitely true. So, you know, if you want a bit more depth, this is a really great book. Because I'm a researcher, I should also send you in the direction of some research if you're interested in that. There's loads of journals that look at this kind of thing, and there's loads of people writing, but I think the Journal of Mathematics and the Arts is one of the most interesting. And it has some gorgeous articles, loads of really, really interesting things. If you're interested, you know, in that kind of research lens on this, do have a look at that or write them an article. This website is by somebody who's called Clarissa Grandy. You might know her. She was part of a recent exhibition that I curated, and I think she's excellent. She's built this entire website full of resources, and they are beautiful and incredibly useful. So artfulmaths.com, and you know, you've literally got lesson plans, step by step, making things, drawing things. I think almost every mathematical art lesson that I can think of that I've taught is there. It's really, really well done. And you can contact Clarissa on Twitter as well if you have ideas, or want to get back to her or show her what you've done in the lesson. I think it's an excellent site, really, really good. The Bridges Conference, there is in fact an entire international conference dedicated to maths and the arts. I did not know this until a few years ago when somebody told me, and I went to it, and my God, did it deliver. It was incredible. There are talks about maths and art and maths and music and maths and fashion, whatever you like, it's there. There is a fashion show, we put on a play, there's a mathematics music evening. There's a gallery every year with mathematics art pieces, and the standard is extraordinary. And if you go to the Bridges Maths site, mathart.org, there are all the past galleries for the past however many years they've been having the conference, and they are jaw-dropping in how beautiful they are. I went to the conference thinking, well, you know, it might be just, you know, the sort of thing I've seen already, a few people doing the same kind of thing. I saw so many things there that I'd never seen before or thought about, and I think I spent something like 6 hours in the gallery because it just blew my mind. It was lovely. I also make a lot of art that's for sale, so a few things that I've talked about today are available on my Redbubble site. Some of the stuff that I make is available as prints, postcards. Redbubble is great because they do a really wide range of stuff. So I mean, you can literally buy socks with my paintings on now, dresses, duvet covers. Somebody just bought this week like a fleece blanket of one of my paintings, which I thought was really exciting. So feel free to have a look in there. And it's really lovely because they sort of print on demand, and you can get, like I say, prints of the pieces as well, or postcards which are a bit more traditional. So I'm going to finish there. I've hopefully given you some examples from my work about how I consider maths, art and design to be really interconnected and really exciting. If you would like to tweet me and continue this discussion, or DM me on Twitter, my DMs are open. If you would like to email me, then please feel free. I'd be very interested to see what you have to say. And if anybody has any questions, I think we may have 1 or 2 minutes, excitingly. So I'll just check the chat. See if there's anything I can do there. But feel free to just unmute and ask me a question. Ooh. Yeah. Love it. Yeah, teaching a peer maths lesson, maths through art is I mean, that is an excellent way to do it. I love it. It's probably worth saying at this point that I give a lot of talks about why this is really not just the thing I talk about. I talk about being a mathematician, representation. I talk about being a queer mathematician a lot. I talk about the intersection of maths, education and gender, sexuality, a recent one on race, lots of issues about identity and representation. My PhD isn't even in this. It's in it's in maths education research for teachers and how teachers get to see maths education research and stuff like that. So I do a lot of design in that front, and then my day job is designing a framework for maths education at the University of Cambridge, for which I've been working on about 5 years now, and it's incredibly exciting, rich work. So if you have questions about maths education, I'd be delighted to talk about that. But equally, you know, I can speak to being an artist, a designer, and a mathematician to lots of audiences. If you know, people need to hear this outside of this forum. If you think, oh, I wish other people knew about this a bit more, because no one seems to get it. I'm happy to be that person and talk to them about it. So please do get in touch if you'd like to. See what's going on there. Yeah. Oh, excellent. A creative maths teacher at PRU. I am doing some work with various PRUs, and I think you must know, but you're doing extraordinary work that other people don't value enough. And so, I hope you understand how important you are and your role and your job. And just saying that you're a creative maths teacher makes me extraordinarily happy. Thank you for self-defining that way. See what else is going on. Yeah, I think that's the big message here. Nobody really told me I could be both. I did both A-level, and like I say, I studied both at university, but the whole time it just felt like those things were competing for me and caused a lot of conflict, really, and unnecessarily so. And I still really, in the world of Cambridge and mathematics that I inhabit, when people encounter me and, I say I'm a mathematical artist, people just say, what is it, you can't be both? Or, oh, you're a weird creative mathematician, not a real mathematician, not a rigorous mathematician. And so I do a lot of work on thinking about breaking that down and saying, why do you think that might be the way that you conceptualize it? And generally just saying you can't be a mathematician and something else is something I do a lot of work on, because people who have minoritized identities get kept out of maths. That's back to the gatekeeping again, really. And it's really not okay. Oh yeah, maths exercise books as sketchbooks. What an excellent idea. And the lessons that we take from sketchbooks, again, nothing needs to be finished. We can make mistakes. We can, do something which we critique in a book, and we don't have to feel like everything in a sketchbook is perfect or the best representation of us. I think making maths books more like a sketchbook is an amazing project. Thank you, that's great to hear. So yeah, hopefully there's some ideas there and some food for thought. And if you want to get in touch with me, talk to me a bit more about any of these ideas, Twitter's probably the best place to do it, especially quickly. And if you do things in the classroom that you want to show me, I would be so grateful to see them. So please put them on Twitter, tag me in it, and I would love to see them. Yes, Joe, absolutely. Leonardo da Vinci perhaps got away with being an artist, a scientist and a mathematician because he was an old white man and that was allowed. I don't know, we'll see. Thank you so much for your attention. It's been a delight to talk to you. And if you want to do some follow-up with me, please feel free. If you want to go away and just think about these ideas some more, also great. And I may see some of you in later sessions. Thank you so much.